Every 6 months, we pick a new author to burn at the stake. First it was Colleen Hoover, then H.D. Carlton, Hazelwood, and today it's Audra Winter. But why is there a penchant for indie authors to get crucified for daring to publish? This isn't just about one book needing editing. This is about stigma, elitism, and why people act like Amazon KDP is the apocalypse. If you're new here, welcome to the Rationally Insane podcast. The vibes here are unfiltered takes, book drama, and indie versus trad chaos. I'm Rachel D. Oak, and in this episode we're going to talk about why these critical takedowns happen, why indie authors face unrealistic expectations compared to traditionally published authors, why quality control isn't the real debate, and where critique just becomes cruelty. First things first, and the whole reason why we're making this episode, the Audra Winter case. If you're unfamiliar with it, Audra Winter is an indie author who just published her debut novel, a fantasy called The Age of Scorpius. And from this book alone, the amount of videos that I've had to suffer through of people dragging this woman to hell and back is genuinely disturbing. And I feel like I want us all to sit down at the table and talk about the difference between a valid critique versus cruelty. Because yes, when people discuss the book itself, they make some valid points. They say that the book needs a bit of editing, that even the first few chapters themselves are quite difficult to get through, and that there's a bit of misleading marketing happening. She's acting as if the book is part of a well-established IP with a large fan base, when that is simply not the case. Okay, fair enough. Be Delulu and act like what you want to happen. Act like an well-established author if that's your goal. I kind of understand that. The point that people are bringing out is that she's not taking critiques very fairly. When people brought forward that the book itself needed editing, the author made a couple of really hard-to-watch videos defending her choices, defending that the reason the writing was quote-unquote awful was because it was a narration by the characters themselves, kind of like a monologue, and the character in question had neurodivergency. Therefore, the way that they thought and the way that they expressed themselves wouldn't be by normal standards. As you can imagine, that's not a very valid excuse, and booktok came down on her like it was the end of the goddamn world. We crossed the line between bringing forth issues about a book and genuinely bullying an author. The amount of YouTube videos out there with thousands of views of people dragging this woman, mocking how distressed she seems and how upset she is at the critique, which, fair enough. She is a new author. She has never had to face a multitude of people criticizing her work. If you spent years working on a piece of art, because books are art, and a bunch of people came out of the woodwork and all bashed you for what you've done, you probably wouldn't be fine and dandy either. You probably wouldn't be mature enough to be able to handle all of that criticism all at once. I think that's pretty clear, and I would assume that the vast majority of us are emotionally equipped to understand that, but apparently I'm hoping for too much out of society because people kept doubling down, and to this day, there's like 2 videos made on TikTok every single day about this author, and about how bad her book is, and about how she's going about the re-editing process of it, to the point where this author is so clearly distressed that she basically implied she might harm herself. And instead of people having a little bit of compassion and taking a step back and being like, well, maybe let's just not discuss this situation anymore, let her, go back to the drawing board, people have taken this video and used it on their little takedown cancel culture videos. What the hell? If you are a human being who is at that level of distress to the point where you pick up the camera and admit that you are having such awful feelings about yourself, how the hell does anybody watching that think, yeah, that's a valid point, let's make a video about it? Like, that's just disgusting to me. And back to some of the valid critiques that are being put out there. For example, people saying, oh yeah, the book needs editing, and it needs severe editing. It is just not at the level that we expected. She is a debut author. Debut, meaning she has never put a piece of work out there to this level of detail. Maybe she had some fanfics or something on Wattpad, but that's not the same as full-on publishing a book. And the criticism coming out being like, oh, she needs a better editor, and she needs this, and she needs more editors. Do you know how much an editor is? This is not a cheap thing that you get off of Fiverr. If you want a good piece of work, you need a good editor, and to get a good editor, you need to pay money for it. I personally can say that I didn't use an editor on my debut novel, besides the fact that I just couldn't really afford it. A debut so often comes with a lot of self-criticism already embedded in it. You're already doubting yourself and thinking you shouldn't do this and people are going to read it and people are going to judge you and yada yada yada. It's so important to just get the book out there that a lot of first-time authors choose to skip things like beta readers and editors in favor of just finally getting a piece of work out there, getting through that first hurdle so that their next pieces of work they can take the time, knowing full well that at least they can now call themselves an actual author because they already have a book published. And that's the problem with having content creators who don't have a lot of knowledge regarding the publishing industry and how hard it is to actually write and publish a book, making critiques about the way an author chose to go about their publishing process. You start comparing a debut indie author on Kindle publishing to a traditionally published author with a whole team behind him. That is not a fair comparison. That will never be a fair comparison. And there's a false divide being created here as well between indie publishing and traditional publishing, which is what I wanted to focus the vast majority of this episode. As someone who published her first few novels on KDP, it was the best thing that has happened to me. If it wasn't for KDP, I would not have a single book out there. I would have never then created a book Instagram account and a book TikTok account, and then a YouTube account, and then this podcast, because I would have never seen myself as an author. I would have never seen myself as somebody who actually had the experience and the knowledge and the credibility to talk about these topics. And while we're at it, do you know how many beloved authors wouldn't exist without KDP? For example, Penelope Douglas is an indie author. She is fully independent. And I don't want to speculate on why she chose to be an independent author, because I'm sure that with the level of success she's earned, publishing houses knocking at her door. But the fact is that traditional publishing contracts are often really exploitative. I have friends who are also authors, and when they discuss how their contracts work, it genuinely makes my stomach churn. If you're not very well known, you're hit with deadlines that are physically impossible for any human being to achieve with any level of quality. The pay that they get per book sold is pennies, literal pennies, even though the reason that whole books exist is because it came from their mind and it came from their pen. And to layer on top of that the soul-crushing edits that you have to face as a traditional published author are absolutely insane. These people, sometimes it feels like they have no heart. Obviously, they're just doing their jobs and they're just trying to make your books better, and I respect a lot the work of copywriters and developmental editors and any kind of editor, right? But as an author who's receiving that on a piece of work that you spent years and hours and poured blood, sweat, and tears into, to get that kind of critique back, you don't walk out unscathed unless you have thick skin. So it's no surprise that a lot of authors, knowing all of this, choose to just go indie. And there's this discourse that I've seen in a lot of articles, especially amongst journalists and people who are higher in the industry, is that traditional publishing somehow guarantees quality. You know, there's a quality control element to it. It's like, we can make sure that the books that go out there are the best. No, you can't. The amount of garbage books out there is insane. Go to your Barnes and Nobles right now and you will see thousands of fey romantasy clones that are traditionally published and are hot garbage. Why? Because that type of genre and that type of trope is going really viral right now, and people in the industry want as many books within the genre to go out as possible to make as much money and ride that high, which renders that quality control argument completely useless. And to me, it just feels like it's this mask for gatekeeping. For a new author, your traditional publishing book deal is not going to be great. It's not going to be a six-figure book deal. You're not going to be able to feed the kids and pay the bills with it unless you're publishing to an insane volume. So you need to come either from money or have enough money in your bank account to be able to sustain yourself while you try to make a career out of being an author. Hence why I'm talking about this elitism and gatekeeping, and I hope I'm making myself clear. But mostly, like, if a book sells, who decides it's not valid? Who decides it's a second-class book? Is it the readers buying it or the gatekeepers who rejected it? I don't know. It all seems so confusing to me, and honestly, readers should be the ones curating the books that they like and defining what they think is quality or not quality. That taste can't be outsourced to publishers who are just trying to make money. It's an industry. It's called publishing industry. It's capitalism in action, you know? Mostly, why is it fine for traditional publishers to churn out these copy-paste fae romances, or back in the day, copy-paste dystopia, but one messy indie debut is suddenly the end of literature as we know it? That makes no sense to me at all. And we need to really draw a line here. Book critique, you want to critique a book, that is fine. You want to shame an author? What the hell is wrong with you? Take a step back. We live on a floating rock. Go touch some grass. It's a book. Why are you going to the trouble of checking every single post this person makes and sitting down and making a 1-hour video about how awful they are? Like, Jesus. Indie books, just because they're indie, doesn't make them second class, okay? Those authors still put an insane amount of effort in it. Even if you don't like the outcome, the effort is still there. So dismissing them as complete jokes hurts the whole industry for obvious reasons. Like, this cultural gatekeeping is genuinely keeping diverse voices out. And in Audra Winter's case, yes, her argument that the character is neurodivergent and therefore people are criticizing the book just because they don't like a neurodivergent voice, for a lot of reasons, it's not a valid defense, but if you are completely unfamiliar with this, and you are an aspiring author who is neurodivergent, you might take that for face value and be like, oh, crap, I can't be an author because I don't write in the way that people, in quotation marks, want me to write. Obviously, this is ridiculous. We shouldn't be encouraging that by any means possible. We should have a slight bit of empathy and enough brain cells to rub together to understand that the way that we're talking about this and the discourse that we're having here should be toned down significantly. And honestly, if self-publishing really ruined publishing, why are traditional publishers scrambling to copy the very same tropes that indie authors made popular? Make that make sense to me. Penelope Douglas went super viral with her dark romance. A couple of other indie authors within the same genre also popped up, and suddenly you've got traditional publishing houses churning out these books faster than you can sneeze. Achoo. Traditional publishing isn't quality control, it's money and luck. And I'm sorry if some people don't like to hear it, but that's just my opinion. Self-publishing isn't ruining publishing by any means. The real problem is how we treat authors for daring to publish at all. Any author that you love right now, that you think is absolutely amazing, once had a first book that sucked, or maybe multiple first books that were genuinely awful. But how else are they supposed to get any good? Anyway, I have an entire episode fully dedicated to Author Takedowns and the cyclical nature of it, and why we're seeing this with Author Winters right now, and why give it a month and we're gonna see it happen with another author. So feel free to go listen to that next. And to keep you on the edge of your seat, next week we're talking all about fanfiction. My guilty little pleasure that is a secret to no one. See you then!